And welcome back. Now, of course, we've been talking about infrastructure development over the last few days, and today we're going to take a little more in-depth focus, and this time particularly looking at infrastructure development in Israel. I'm absolutely delighted to have with us the head of infrastructure and PPP project unit from the Israeli Ministry of Finance. So a very, very warm welcome now as I hand over to Yitsik Marmelshtein. Yitsik, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Edna, for introducing me. Good afternoon. And I want to start by saying how much I'm excited and honored to be here on this construction conference. What was only a few weeks ago a far dream is now becoming a blossom and a fruitful cooperation between Israel and the Emirates, and I'm very proud to represent Israel in this conference. So my name is Yitsik Marmelshtein. I had the infrastructure and PPP project unit in the Ministry of Finance in Israel. My three major roles are one is that I work with all governmental companies on the field of petroleum, gas, electricity, and water. I also, the second one is that I work with all the governmental entities on those fields, the Water Authority, the Ministry of Energy. I was a member of the Petroleum Council, the Israeli Petroleum Council. And my third role is that I had a few PPP interministerial committees, such as the Desalination Committee, the Power Station Committee, the Solar Station Committee, etc. PPP is the public-private partnership I assume here in the construction conference everyone is familiar with, but I'll explain more later. So what I want to talk with you about today is first the need to boost infrastructure investment in Israel. We have done huge work with McKinsey a couple of years ago, and we are now implementing it through different channels, but a major one is the public-private partnerships in Israel, and I will talk a bit about how we implement it and what we do, and then we'll see a short case study how the PPP method is being very, very, very accelerated and working great in Israel. So let's start by the first question. What we did when we took McKinsey is that we tried to see how do we perform or where do we stand in comparison to the rest of the world. So what we did is we tried to figure out what is Israel's core infrastructure stock, which means how much infrastructure we have in comparison to our GDP. And we saw that in Israel, our infrastructure stock is roughly 50% of GDP, while in the OECD or global benchmark are talking on 70%, this means that we are a lot lower than where is the benchmark. And why is that important? It is important because, as you all know already, infrastructure gives you the holy grail of economy, which is economic growth. Eventually, the government deals a lot with how to cut the cake and to decide who gets what. But one of the main ways for the government to not only divide the cake between the different parties, but also to increase it and to make it a larger cake is by investing in infrastructure. I don't need to read you can read from yourself, but I just read what the OECD is saying, that increasing share of public investment by 1 percentage point would increase the long-term GDP level by about 5%, which is a lot, and this is what we are looking for. So another thing that we did is that we tried to see where Israel is heading toward 2030. If we are today, you can see here in the slide, if the line is the trend line, then you can see that if Israel will maintain its current investment level, which is roughly $8 billion annually, then it will not only, it won't stay where it is now, which is point B, it will deteriorate into point C. And if we want to get to the trend line where the rest of the world, where Israel needs to be, we need to double our investment from $8 billion annually into $16 billion annually, which is a huge challenge for us. And this is something that that I'll talk how we are moving forward to get it. Now, we have said that we need to invest a lot of money. We said that if we will invest it, then it will affect tremendously about our ability to achieve economic growth. But the question now is that we wanted to find out is where do we need to put the money? Because we all know that we are staying in traffic jams. I know that when I go to job in the morning, not now during COVID, but pre-COVID, when there was still traffic and people didn't work from home, I know that I'm all day in traffic. So what does it mean? Does it mean that it means that Israel needs to put a lot of investment in roads? So we checked how Israel performs in the different sectors in accordance, in comparison to the OECD average or to peer group average. Peer group average is something that we done. It's something that we done in order to find out how similar countries to Israel are performing, because in the OECD there are different kinds of countries, and Israel eventually is a small country also in area and in population. So we wanted to find out how does it work not only in the OECD but also in countries that are more similar to Israel. And what we can see here is that actually, as I said before, we don't need more roads. You see in the green, we are on the benchmark or above. Where is our problem? Is the light rail and heavy rail that is not developed enough in Israel. We have enough ports, we have enough airports. We have a problem in power. One of the main problems in Israel, and it's a big shift that we are doing nowadays, is moving from fuel-generated electricity into renewables. We have, as I said, we are progressing with this program. One of the things that we did in the government decided 2 weeks ago that our goal for 2030 is 30% renewables, 30% generation from renewables. We are now standing at 7.5%. So we have the need in the next decade to increase our investment in solar power tremendously, like double 6 times. So this is something that we are working very hard on. And as I speak right now, we are just publishing a huge PPP tender in Israel for solar power, including energy storage and batteries. It will be one of the largest in the world, and it's going to be the biggest one in Israel of 3,000 units. So this is about power. Telecom, this is something that we need to invest. Everyone now see the need for telecom. It's not just businesses, but also during COVID, we are all working from home. And we see in Israel, we have a lot of problems in that. And also in water. In water, there is something which is very interesting, that although the investment in Israel in water is pretty low, when you go into details and what we do is that we go into details and to see in each sector where exactly is the problem. And if someone wants, then I can speak about it later, but not in that presentation. That in water, even though our investment is pretty low, we are performing pretty well, which means that we have done very smart investments in water, because it's not only about to put the money, it's also about putting it in the right place. So with that in mind, we've asked ourselves, okay, so we need to increase by $8 billion. Let's say that we will increase only by $6 billion. Where are we going to bring all this money from? Because it's a lot of money annually for Israel. And what you can see here, that we do one scenario, if we only increase in 75% our investment from $8 billion a year into $14 billion a year. And you can see here that the sources for that, one of the main sources is private, and also in the tariff, there are a lot of, I know it's written tariff, but a lot of the tariff it's also in PPP projects. And this is also very important to say now that this is a pre-COVID slide. We still haven't concluded how are we going to deal with COVID, because COVID is still here. But obviously, COVID has fiscal implications on our ability of a variable budget, not only this year but also next year, because COVID is very it's a fiscal challenge. There is a lot of investment from the budget during this year, and we will need to see if we will have the funds next year. What I assume is that we will see that a lot of what we plan to do through budget will go through private-public partnership, because there is money in the market. It's just that the government had to spend a lot during this year. So how we do all the private, as I said, that we are going to increase the private investment. So in Israel, we have a method which is called private-public partnership projects, which is something that I'm responsible. I have nowadays under my responsibility projects of approximately $7 billion that I'm in charge of. And Israel has a very good experience with the PPP projects. In a nutshell, PPP, which is public-private partnership, is a method in which the government, the private sector, and the financiers are cooperating in a partnership in order to establish infrastructure. We can see in Israel that we did it in desalination. We have nowadays 5 working desalination plants and 1 in construction. In energy, in the thermosolar and the PV, we did it in transportation, in light rails. Now it's something that we are working very hard on it, because you saw 2 slides before that we have problems with rails, so we are working very hard on light rails. So we have light rails, highways, fast lanes, so we have a lot of experience. But what is more interesting that you can see here, that it was an investment of roughly $12 billion in the last 15 years. And if you can see what we have on our pipeline today, is that you can see that we have nowadays, before operation, in the different tenders, in the different tender phases, we have $18 billion just during those years. I mean, 15 years we did 12 billion. Now we are doing 18 billion in 2 years, which is a lot, and it's something that we are doing from where I started. We saw that we need to increase our investment, and one of the ways that we do it is through PPP. And this is what we actually do. It's not just we are saying that we need it, we are actually implementing it. We have light rails, solar powers, desalination, waste treatment facility, a lot of projects. And we have another project, if you can see here, that you can see that our investment is between 55 billion to 205 billion. 3 NIS is worth $1, approximately. So we have another huge project, which is called the Metro. It's a $50 billion project that we are working on it nowadays. It's something that Israel needs to realize how it's going to do, because as you see, it's something that we haven't done. We have nowadays $8 billion investment annually, and we need in all infrastructure, and we want to invest $50 billion in just one project. This is highly challenging, and this is something that we are working with the Ministry of Transportation nowadays, and I hope that post-COVID we will be able to implement it. Nowadays we are more concerned in dealing with COVID, but just on the metro, as you can see here, even during the COVID, even now, we are pushing forward private investment, because we know that the way to get out of a crisis is by, one of the ways is by infrastructure. And my last slide and my last remark is that just to see how much we are experienced in in this method of the public-private partnerships is what we did now in the Sorek desalination plant. Sorek desalination plant is 200 million cubics per year desalination, plus 150 megawatts power plants, and it included an EIB funding. EIB fund this project in 150 million euros. And what we have here, you can see yourself, that we've been able, one of them, to implement this project from 2 years from governmental decision to beginning of construction. One of the major criticism about the PPP method is that it takes a lot of time because of the tender process and how it's being done. And nowadays we are so experienced in this method that we were able.
Can you give me the permission to record?
2 years from one end to the other.
Can you give me permission to record?
Begin construction. So we know that the PPP is something that we are going to boost because we need to boost infrastructure. Not only now it's even becoming more acute due to COVID. We know that we need private funding in order to do it, and we have the ability to implement it very, very, very quickly. And we are very welcoming to foreign investors and foreign financiers. We have everything is being done in English, and it's wide. It's publicly. You can see all our tenders on websites. So if you have any questions on that regard, on our pipeline, or about the PPP method, how we do it in Israel, or where our investments can be done in Israel, so we are very welcoming. You can contact me, and that's it. So if you have any questions on what you just saw, so please feel free to ask questions.
Yitsik, thank you so much, and really, really a great review, and indeed a great situation update in terms of what's going on with regards to the infrastructure and the development that's going on, particularly when it comes to PPP in Israel. So thank you so much, Yitsik. If I may stay with the Sorek 2 desalination plant, because this was, done in record time. You went about it in a very different way, and of course you had EIB funding in that. Talk to me just a little bit more about this and the uniqueness, I suppose, of such a tremendous infrastructure build.
First of all, let me say thank you, Ifna, for inviting me to this conference and to give me the opportunity to present Israel pipeline of PPP projects for the future and infrastructure in general. So it's an honor for me to be here. Regarding your question about Sorek was indeed a tremendous success. We have been able to reduce timetables from 4 years from government resolution until construction to 2 years. It's cutting the timeline by almost half, or even more than half, which is a tremendous achievement. And I think that it has happened due to a few important items. The first one is the experience that we have in Israel in those projects. We know how to do the right risk allocation between the private sector, the banks, and the state, which give a lot of comfort to all participants. And as you said, EIB has funded this project in 150 million euros, which means that we have done, as you know, when the European Investment Bank goes into a project, it does a very thorough examination of the way the committees work, of the environment in Israel, and that was achieved. So, as I said, first for the experience, but secondly is that we implemented a very unique course of tender process. Is what we did is that instead of choosing one successful bidder, we chose 2 successful bidders, and each bidder needed to take a full funding, a full financial close, and to submit a revised proposal, a better offer. This mechanism, this tender process, has gained us, first of all, it reduced project cost by $400 million, which is a lot for a project. It's for this project. And also it allowed for all the financial close process to be in competition. And competition on itself has its own uniqueness and its own stimulations. And one of the biggest of them is the incentive to achieve all the milestones on time. Because if you don't submit your proposal or your documentation in time, then there is someone else. So that gives a lot of stimulation to the market to meet timetable and in a very short timetable. So those two main elements, the experience and the BAF, allowed us to really shorten timetables.
Now, talk to me about many of the big changes that we're seeing in Israel at the moment, and we're looking at reforms in different sectors, privatization in electricity and water. Yes, we see that great project there in desalinization, but also in the electricity and the power sector. And of course, in any country, this is, a very lucrative sector. It's a very important sector because power is something that obviously everybody needs. And with a growth in population, we're going to see, growth in demand for power as well. So how will it change things now that, we've seen those reforms in that sector?
That's a very good question. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, we have decided that we need to increase Israel's annual investment from $8 billion a year to $16 billion a year. And this is being done not only by PPP, that has been much more developed and much more, we give it a lot of boost to the PPP, but also with the governmental companies. What we did in the governmental companies, for example, with Mekorot, which is the national water company, we have doubled their investment budget annually. But what we said that we are doing that and we're giving a lot of stimulation, a lot of money. But what we want you to do is that from now on, you have to do all your construction with tenders. It means that Mekorot is not doing all the investment internally. It publishes public tenders, and everyone are welcome to participate in that. And on the energy sector that you've asked, we've just had a governmental resolution a month ago that has decided to increase the renewable energy percentage of the entire electricity to 30% by 2030. And nowadays we are just on 7.5%, and we are going to, it's 6 in order to achieve this growth in solar power, in solar and wind, but mainly in Israel it's solar because we have a lot of sun. And this is something that we are working on it today. We are pushing it through. We just published a tender with 50 megawatt storage 2 weeks ago. It's something that we are working really hard on. And we are looking for foreign investors and foreign companies to come and participate in those tenders. We are a very open market, and we want foreign investors and to come and to take part in the Israeli market.
And of course, when we look at the energy sector particularly, you're talking a lot about mainly solar there. So at the moment, 7.5% of your energy coming from renewable, but really some very ambitious plans there to make sure that you can actually double that. And even I would imagine beyond 2030, you're looking perhaps at doing maybe even better than doubling it. What are the longer term plans in terms of, the energy distribution, in terms of the diversification of energy? Because you're, an importer right now, really.
So we just had the governmental resolution a month ago. We are working on the longer term resolutions and plans, but we still haven't decided yet exactly what will be the longer term goals. We are now focusing on trying to reach the 30% by 2030, which is a lot. It's a lot of investment. It's actually, we are shifting the market from fuel energy and carbon energy into renewable energy. It's a huge shift. Is changing the way the market works.
And of course, everybody who is going to invest there, number one, they're going to be looking at the return of investment. And this is absolutely essential. Investors are there's no charity cases out there in the investment market, even among the big infrastructure and development banks. I mean, they're all looking for good, solid, bankable projects. Would you say that right now there will be many, many more of them in the years to come in Israel? And this is probably a good time, would you say, to be looking at this?
So in terms of projects, we have, as I presented, we have a very solid pipeline for years ahead in all sectors. We have light rails, we have tenders. We've just started construction and achieved financial close on the light rail in Tel Aviv. In Jerusalem, we have tenders going on right now for 3 light rails, 2 in Tel Aviv, 1 in Jerusalem. We are working on another one in Jerusalem, another line, which is very, I think, very interesting. On the energy sector and water sector, on the water sector, we are going to publish another desalination plant in the next month. And as I said, Mekorot has, the national water company has a long pipeline. And beside that, we have the metro project.
Now, talk to me about metro. This is a very, very exciting project, and it's, again, a huge project. You're looking at something like $50 billion. I mean, this is for the potential that's there. Where are you at the moment? Are you in the tender phases? And just bring us through the opportunities that are going to be there. And I think the depth and the scale of this project, it really looks like this is going to be, a mega project in many ways.
It is a mega project because, as I said, Israel, until 2 years ago, has invested $8 billion a year annually. And now we are going to invest $50 billion in only one project, in just one project, which is a huge investment and a huge leap for the state of Israel, or a huge leap forward. We understand nowadays this, if we want to solve a traffic jam in Israel, and this project is going to be located in the center of Israel, in Tel Aviv and the neighboring cities, and it's going to cover, we're going to have 3 lines that are going to cover all coastal plain, center of coastal plain in Israel. We understand that this is something that we have to do in order to solve the traffic jam and allow mobility between the cities. What we plan now is that we are working on the governmental resolution. I mean, there's all been the entities that are working on the zoning and on all the planning have started working already. There is a zoning plan which has already been approved, and we are now working on the larger plan. We are working on the governmental resolution nowadays, and I hope it will be published in the next 2 or 3 months for the metro plan. And another thing that you've asked and I didn't fully answer is about the return on investment in a project in Israel. So in PPP project, it's usually between 10% to 14%. This is like a finger thumb number, which is roughly between 10 to 14% on the PPP projects.
And again, I think this is what ultimately people are looking for as they look around the world and decide where they're going to put that investment. And again, looking at the region right now and looking, I think, at the big changes and the big shifts in the region. One other area, of course, when it comes to infrastructure too, is, it's telecoms, it's data, it's the absolute availability 24/7 in terms of like good telecoms and good broadband. Is this something also that you're looking at developing? Because again, it really needs to be rolled out everywhere. I think it's becoming something I think that people just take for granted now, that everybody has to have good access to broadband and to data and to fiber all over the world.
True that. And what we do is that we are now on the middle of, I don't know if I'm saying the right word, but we are now implementing the net of we have companies that are working on connecting entire Israel in cyber connect. I don't know if I'm saying the correct word, through electrical, optical, I don't know, I'm not remembering the exact word, but we are working on it very hard right now. I hope that our aim is to get to 200 megabytes per household connection And this is what we are working at right now.
So when we think of infrastructure development, also, you know, in terms of roads and bridges and just general build, is PPP the best way, would you say, always to go forward in terms of making sure that you're bringing in the private investors, but obviously closely working on these essential projects, because ultimately that's what they are for the people there as well?
So it's a good question, because it's not in all sectors the PPP method is good for all sectors. I think that nowadays, like in roads, other methods like design build might be better. It depends where is the road and how complicated is that, if it's going to be a toll road or not a toll road. When you do a project in a PPP, you need to figure out, as you've asked me, how much is the return on investment in Israeli project. So it's always a matter of how high is the risk. Because if the risk is very low, then the return on investment is low as well. And in Israel, we know how to do this risk management. In very simple and small roads, I don't see any reason to invest so much for the PPP project, because PPP projects has a lot of deal cost, which doesn't work if the project is too small. But in all different areas like light rails, desalination plants, solar plants, it's obviously one of the best methods to implement.
And of course, all of these projects essential for people who live there. So, I mean, I think bringing in the PPP model, and this model, of course, you know, I'm sure it's regulated, it's well thought out, it's been in place there, so people can be reassured it's a good platform, so to speak, and a good way to invest.
Obviously, we have a standard PPP. This is something that we are implementing in all projects. So and also, as I said before, the EIB is highly involved in projects in Israel, which means that he believes that what we do is being done correctly. So I think that on that terms, investors can be reassured that we are doing very good and solid work on that regard.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and for bringing us up to date with all of those projects that are going on, really looking right across the board there at the investment opportunities.